I really love that song, and I would just point out that in that song it says, "I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to," and there's two parts to that. There's two sides to that, really. It is, I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to do in me. That's the first part of it. But the second part of it is, I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to through me as well. Not just in us, and certainly we all have changes that we need to make. But we're not meant to be a vessel that just takes. We're meant to be a vessel that gives, that pours ourselves back out, and Jesus keeps filling us up. We're in an 8-week series called Come See a Man, and the entire point of this series is to take another deeper look, to take a look at Jesus and some of the things that he did with his 33 years while he was here on earth. And so we want to come see this man and learn about him, learn about his life, and try and mimic his example and do the things that he did while he was here. We're going to get to John chapter 13, and so if you have a Bible or your Bible app or whatever, go ahead and get there now. Right now. No, just go ahead and get there, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute. It'll be John chapter 13, verse 1 is where we'll start. And I'll tell you a story while you're getting there. I love my iPhone. I also hate it at the same time because it's always in my hand and it's always annoying and all that. But one of the great things about the iPhone is the reminders that you can set up. You'll have a reminder that pops up on your phone, and you say, oh, okay, cool. I forgot that I have a colonoscopy today. And then you just have to, go do your thing. But before iPhones were around, and I am that old, before iPhones were around, and before I had the Reminders app, you had to write stuff down or straight up remember. Like something that was going on, you had to either have a notepad or something, or have a calendar or something like that before those things would pop up. And I remember one time, before these iPhone reminders were so readily available, I blacked out on something huge. Shannon and I and the kids, we were living in Midlothian, and Virginia. We were living up in Midlothian, Virginia. We lived on this cul-de-sac, Standing Oak Court. It was very bougie up there in Midlothian. And we were living on this court, and it was cool because we had our 3 kids, and there was a bunch of other little kids in the neighborhood, and they were always running around in the cul-de-sac, riding bikes and stuff like that. And in fact, one of the kids taught my son how to ride a bike. He straight robbed me of that privilege to teach my son how to ride a bike, and he just came outside. They like rang the doorbell. Hey, Silas can ride a bike. We're like, what? And so anyway, but it was great. And so all of the kids were always out there playing and having fun and doing their thing together. And all of the adults that went with those children were almost as cool as me and Shannon. And so we had a good time hanging out. And so we'd bring like chairs out and sit in the cul-de-sac and hang out. The kids would be playing. All the adults would be having fun and doing all that. And so one Friday, the kids were out there playing, and I went outside, and I saw my neighbor John across the street. I was like, hey, let's hang out. And so he gets a chair. He comes over, hangs out. Other people start coming, and next thing you know, there's 10 adults out there, and we're all hanging out, having a good time. And, we started talking about food in the mid to late afternoon, and nobody had any plans going on. And so I had the idea, well, let me go get my grill. I'll bring it out here into the cul-de-sac. Let's just gather up meats, and we'll just start grilling meats out here, and we'll have a good time. And all the dads were like, yes, absolutely, we'll do that. Women got salad for some, I don't know, whatever. But they came out there, and so we're just grilling and having fun. We're meat's cooking. We're all hanging out. The kids are playing. About 10 minutes to 7, I get a phone call from one of my really good friends named Cameron Bailey. He's a preacher out to somewhere in the country. He's country. And he said, hey, are you close? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're speaking at 7 o'clock. This is 10 minutes to 7. He lived an hour and a half away. I said, I am not close at all. And I completely blacked out. And you ever had that feeling, like that super sinking feeling, like I wish that my excuse was I was dead instead of I forgot about this thing. And I didn't have a reminder set. And I had committed to this thing months and months prior. It was a youth event that they were having. And he was like, I got to go. I'll figure something out. And so we hung up, rightfully So he's very angry because I completely blacked out about that. It was all my fault. I didn't have any reminders written down. Totally forgot. That was not a fun afternoon. But let me ask you, raise your hand if you're somebody who needs a lot of reminders about stuff, all right? All right, raise your hand if you don't need a lot of reminders. Raheem, you don't need a lot of reminders? All right. Right. All right, it's funny. If a husband raised their hand that they don't need a lot of reminders, the wife was like, come on. Yeah, come on, bro. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she is the reminder. The only real issue with reminders is that you have to remind yourself to set reminders. It's kind of crazy how our brains work. You know, we might say, I didn't remember to remind myself to set the reminder to remember something, and it gets super confusing. But we as human beings, we do need reminders from time to time. I would say especially in 2023 when there are so many distractions that our attention can go to throughout the day. We can get off track, misfocused, all that stuff all day long. Our attention can get diverted very, very easily, and so I do think it's like kind of vital that we have reminders in our life. Today, I want us to be reminded that Jesus came here to serve. Jesus came to this earth to serve. And he said in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, I did not come to be served, but to serve. So today, I want us to come see a man who serves. That's Jesus. Now, I'm going to set it up for you. In Luke chapter 22, which is not where I need you to be. I need you to be in John 13. All right, so get to John 13 if you're there, but hold on to that. In Luke chapter 2, if you don't know this, the first 4 books of... Did you guys hear that? Was that a wolf? This is the problem with ADD. Did you do something, Chris? Thanks a lot. The first 4 books of the New Testament are called the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's basically the same story written from 4 different perspectives. And so each of them does not necessarily have the same chronological account of what went on. But you can put them together and get clues as to how stuff happened. And so that's why in Luke chapter 22, the setup for John 13 happens. Does that make sense? Yes. Thank you for explaining that. So in Luke chapter 22, Judas, who many people have heard of, Judas agrees to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Now, Jesus and his disciples are outside of town, but Jesus sends his disciples into town to prepare the upper room for the Passover celebration. If you don't know what the Passover celebration is, go all the way back to the book of Exodus. It's the second book in the Bible. And what you'll find is that when the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, they prayed and prayed and prayed for God to get them out of this slavery and mistreatment. And God sent 10 plagues, and one of them was the angel of death that was going to take the life of every firstborn thing in the country, unless they had painted the blood of a lamb over their door frame. So if they had done that, then the angel of death would pass over their home. So this is the celebration of the Passover festival that they are getting ready for. So the disciples, they go up and they set up the room and they start reclining around the table. And Jesus is ultimately having dinner with his best friends. And this is where he gives us the tradition of communion that we will do later in this service. He says, this is my body, looking at some bread. This is my blood, looking at the juice. And he says, eat these things in remembrance of me. He's setting communion up as a reminder for us. Then, out of nowhere, Jesus announces, somebody's going to betray me. So the disciples start talking about who it is that's going to betray him. And Peter says, not me. I'll die for you. And Jesus goes, yeah, but Peter, before the rooster crows 3 times, you're going to betray me 3 times. And Peter just sits down quietly. He goes, okay, sorry. So the disciples start arguing about who it might be that's going to betray Jesus, which somehow devolved into them arguing about which one of them is going to be the greatest disciple. I don't know how that transition happened, but it's a mess. And Jesus, sitting there, about to be arrested, about to be beaten, about to be crucified, and these guys are arguing over who's going to be the greatest. And so I'll paraphrase. Please know it's a paraphrase. I'll paraphrase what Jesus said. Listen, dummies. It's not in the Bible. I made that up. The greatest is the one who serves. I am here as one who serves. I'm trying to give you guys a kingdom here, and you won't shut up or listen. I've given you guys everything, and you still don't get it. And so I imagine a quiet falls over the room as everyone begins to realize how wrong they are, how selfish they've been, how impetuous, how arrogant, how self-serving. They've all been arguing who's going to be the greatest. John 13, verse 1 is where the story continues. In that passage it says, it was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He knows that his death is impending. Having loved his own who were in the world, the disciples, he loved them to the end. Now, some versions of that will say he showed them the full extent of his love. I like that translation better, personally. He knows he's about to die. He knows what's about to go on. And so because he knows that information, he's going to show them the full extent of his love. Verse 2, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Well then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, wash everything. Not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And Jesus answered, okay, Peter, calm down. Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. And now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. I want to focus in on a few lines from that passage. First one, 13:1. He loved them to the end, or he showed them the full extent of his love. The full extent of Jesus' love for them is that he served them. That was the full extent of his love. He showed his love for his disciples with action, by doing something. 13:2. The devil prompted Judas to betray Jesus. Now, this is where the temptation comes in that we talked about in here last week. Prompted does not mean that you have to do something. Prompted does not mean that Judas had to do this. He had an opportunity to walk away from this betrayal, but he chose differently. And lots of times we are prompted or we are tempted to do something, and even though the urge is powerful, we do not have to go forward with that thing. We don't have to. It's not a foregone conclusion. And as Jesus taught us last week, 4 words, away from me, Satan. Saying that causes the devil to flee. The Bible promises that if we resist the devil, he will flee from us. And so even though Judas was prompted to do this, he did not have to do it. And even though you may be prompted to do something sinful in your life, you do not have to do it. You don't have to do it. In 13:3, it said Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. So, even though the disciples were arguing over who is the greatest, Jesus is actually great, and his disciples, who are not great, could not stop arguing about how great they were. These guys, oh man, if you read these stories, these guys, the disciples, I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like we would do better, but probably not. But man, they made some boneheaded mistakes. But I love this. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. All things under his power. The first thing he did when he knew that he had all things under his power was to get up and to wash his disciples' feet. The first thing he did was to serve his friends. And to me, there's something really awesome and powerful to have that authority and to get on your knees and do a menial task like that. It's actually quite beautiful if you think about it. Toward the end of the passage, it says, now that I have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. Okay, everybody shoes off. We're about to do this. We've got a hose and a bucket full of Dawn. No, I'm just kidding. What I think is happening is Jesus is showing them that in order to be great, which they were arguing about, that you must serve in whatever way the situation dictates. Meaning that even if you think something is beneath you, Jesus is encouraging you to do it. And he gave an example of doing it so that we would do that. Now, the washing of feet. Let's get into that, okay? Because I felt like everybody's like, I got to get out of here, man. The washing of feet was a practice for thousands of years leading up to this event. Thousands of years. I mean, people walked around on dusty roads with open-toed chanclas or Birkenstocks, and whenever they got to where they were going, their feet were dirty. Just makes sense. They walked on dirt. So washing feet became a normal part of entering someone's home. It was just the culture at that time. It was the culture at that time. Now, culture has changed, and we do not have a need to wash each other's feet as we enter someone's home. We just don't need to do that. Now, you might take your shoes off at the door, but we just don't really need to be washing each other's feet when somebody comes over. It's just not a cultural need that we have anymore. So it makes me ask the question, what is the modern day equivalent of that? You know, if washing feet is not a cultural thing that we need to do right now, what's the modern day equivalent of that? Here's my answer. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that this story about Jesus washing feet can serve as a reminder for us to act on our faith, however the situation dictates. And he said in 13:15, I did this to set an example for you. Hey, you guys couldn't stop arguing and promoting yourself, so I just showed you what you need to be about. You need to be about serving other people. Be about fulfilling the example. And the reason for the example is so that they would do it. Jesus didn't show them this so that we could have an illustration 2,000 years later in church. He showed them this so that they would actually do it, so that we would actually participate in serving other people. It was done intentionally to teach them and to teach us. And he says in the end, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Do is the operative word in that passage. It's not know, it's do. He didn't say you'll be blessed if you know these things. He said you'll be blessed if you do these things. Jesus washed his disciples' feet to serve as a reminder that no matter how great you think you are, no one is above serving someone else. We're just not. We're not. So, we need to come see a man who serves. Northampton has been around for 61 years. 61 years. I think it'd be dope to get to 122 years. I think that'd be pretty neat on Todd's Lane to double our lifespan here. But I can tell you this. If we ever cease to be a church that serves, we will never get there. We will never get there. We as a church and as individuals must follow the example of Jesus. We come see a man who serves. Okay, so washing feet serves as a reminder. See how I tied in the cool story about being reminded? And by the way, is it like 1,000 degrees in here? Yes. See, where's Mike? Yeah, can you make that not be 1,000 degrees, Chris? Thank you. I'm schwitzing up here. I don't know. I hope that's not a bad word. All right. Washing feet serves as a reminder, first of all, that we need to love others. Jesus showed them the full extent of his love. And for us to love others, it means that we will need to serve other people. The disciples were having a petty argument about who was the greatest. And Jesus could have easily stood up, told them to shut up, or say, "What is wrong with you guys?" But he didn't. His reaction was to love them by serving them. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever get annoyed with people? How could you? What if you tried to serve them in love instead of allowing the annoyance to divide you? I mean, there's another passage in Romans that says something to the effect of, if your enemy needs food, give them food, and if you do that, you'll be heaping burning coals on their head. They won't be able to understand why you're serving them. But then maybe one day you get a chance to say, well, Jesus loved me this much, and I love you this much, and this is what we do. Washing feet serves as a reminder to love others. Washing feet also serves as a reminder for us to serve. To serve. Jesus did the most menial task that was for the most lowly servants and lowly slaves. Today, serving someone else might be menial or low, but not always. It's actually just about your willingness and your availability. Serving other people is about your willingness and your availability. If you say, God, I'm available to you, but you are not willing to actually step up and do something, then that don't count. It doesn't work like that. You have to be available and willing. Look at this passage from Proverbs 3. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act. This is saying, if you see a need, fill a need. If you can fill a need, you should do that. If you can fill a need and you avoid that, we are not loving like Jesus has taught us to love one another. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Washing feet serves as a reminder to follow Jesus' example, which was humility, compelled by love in order to serve. Washing feet serves as an example, serves to help us follow Jesus' example. Washing feet serves as a reminder for us to know our role. To know our role. No servant is greater than his master. Jesus said that. I did not come to be served, but to serve. He knew his role, and we need to know our role as well. We were created to serve. Look at this passage from Ephesians 2:10. We are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do what? Oh my goodness. Is that screen blurry? We are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do what? Good works. That is exactly right. That is our role. That's what we were created to do, and so we must know our role. Washing feet serves as a reminder, lastly, for us to act on our faith. Jesus said in the passage, you will be blessed if you do these things. And to me, this seems like an if-then situation. If you do this, then you will be blessed. If you do not do this, then you will not be blessed. I don't want to take it that far. I'm not trying to put a lock on what Jesus is going to do. But he promises in the passage, if you do these things, you will be blessed. How many times have you served someone else in your life, and it maybe cost you something more than just your time? Maybe it cost you a little bit of money. But then after you do that thing, you're like, you feel pretty good about that. I think that's what Jesus is talking about here. The byproduct of obedience is this blessing that comes along with saying yes to Jesus. All right, now, I didn't have time for these two, but I got two more. They're not in your bulletin. But here's two more things that washing feet serves as a reminder to do. It's to remember who's in charge of your life. All right? It serves as a reminder to remember who's in charge of your life. And also to think of others more highly than ourselves. That's actually biblical. The Bible tells us to think of other people more highly than we think of ourselves. So here's the deal, the bottom line of all of this. If we want to be like Jesus, we need to serve like Jesus. Come see a man who served. If we want to be like Jesus, we need to serve like Jesus. Washing feet serves as a reminder, and it helps us to remember Jesus. The same night that all of this stuff happened, Jesus also instituted a practice that we call communion. That night, his last night on earth, he was having dinner with his friends, and he told them, whenever you eat this bread and drink from this cup, do it to remember me. Whenever you eat this bread and drink from this cup, do it to remember me. This communion serves as a reminder of Jesus' full extent of love for all of us.